to everybody, or could it be good afternoon or good morning, or might be some other time in the world, but welcome to today's SEFI at Work session. It's my real pleasure to host today's SEFI at Work session. SEFI at Work sessions are online seminars that bring together us as engineering educators to discuss a topic of interest. And today's topic is on continuing engineering education. So if you're not interested in continuing engineering education, you can slowly go away and leave the meeting now. But if you are interested, then please stay. You'll see that the session is being recorded and will be on the SEFI YouTube channel afterwards, and we'll also make available the slides to everybody. So please don't worry if you're having to scribble down something or the diagrams later on. So today's focus is on continuing engineering education, and it follows on from the wonderful SEFI Annual Conference that took place last month in Lausanne, Switzerland. Why are we having this? Well, we wanted to share what we had been discussing at the conference, both because some colleagues that we are within SEFI couldn't attend, but we recognised that there's wider international interest in this topic of continuing engineering education. Let me introduce myself now. I'm Dr. Chris Smith, and I'm based at Glasgow Caledonian University, where I'm a senior lecturer in the Institute for University to Business Education, and my passion is around work-based learning and continuing engineering education. No surprises there then for today's session. I'm delighted today to be wearing two hats as a facilitator. One as a co-chair of the Special Interest Group in Continuing Engineering Education, and also as the co-vice president for partnerships with a specific focus on Europe for the International Association for Continuing Engineering Education, IACEE, who are co-sponsoring today's event. And it's wonderful to have our colleagues from IACEE with us today. If you're not from any of these organizations, brilliant. We're looking forward to getting to know you, and please get in touch with us and engage with the conversation. So, what are we going to focus on today? The focus is on what was discussed at the conference with regards to continuing engineering education and a bit to do with lifelong learning. We've got some of the colleagues from the SEFI SIG that will be sharing some of their insights about what they felt the key topics are to provide a launch pad to then move forward into discussions. And towards the end, we'll talk about some next steps in upcoming events as well. So please, if you can keep your questions, till we get to the discussions, that would be great, because that's the bit where we want us to be interactive and engaging and discussing with each other. You've heard me mention two organisations, and just seeing as that we have people that might be associated with one or both or neither, I just wanted to say a little bit about the organisations. SEFI is the leading organisation in Europe for engineering education more broadly, and as you can see, it has a wide representation in terms of countries. It is a membership organisation and focused on driving forwards engineering education for its members. It does this particularly through its special interest groups, of which there are currently 13 that are listed here, and the one that's reflected in today's SEFI at Work is the one on continuing engineering education and lifelong learning. The other organisation involved, as I said, is IACEE. This has just celebrated its 35th birthday at the recent May World Congress in Spain. This has a global international connection and again is a membership organisation. The three pillars of the IACEE are roundabout research, advocacy and service. And as a highlight, some of its key focus at the moment is on encouraging knowledge exchange through its world conferences and symposia, on progressing sustainability action and research and action through the Serena platform, and obviously about benchmarking in terms of quality assurance. So hopefully you can see there's overlap between the two organisations and our shared interests. So enough about the organisations that wonderfully sponsor this. Let's get down to what we want to focus on today. Before I get into setting some scene and introducing the people that are going to share ideas, I want to introduce the ethos for what we're about to go into. As membership organisations, a key thing we do is to share and seek to connect and partner to solve problems to make education better for our engineering students, and for the wider society. And that's the ethos I really want us to keep in mind as we go through this, the main part of today's session, is you'll listen to some ideas, listen, do they resonate with you? Have you seen these before? Have you tackled them? What ideas have you got? Have you got a solution? If great, we want to hear from you. But is there some opportunity for us to continue beyond today's session to discuss these ideas further? So what is today's focus? Well, as I said, we had the SEFI Annual Conference in Lausanne. It was a great conference. It was one of the largest, I do believe, Clara, with over 550 attendees, with 40 countries represented. For anyone that wasn't there, and you'll see the slides later, I have put a link into the conference program, but the formal proceedings will be published shortly. So please do look out for that if you're interested. But of interest for today was the fact that there were a number of presentations, posters, and ideas presented around continuing engineering and education and lifelong learning. So, rather than me tell you all about the wonderful things, I have some amazing colleagues and SIG members, and they very graciously agreed to share their insights. So I'm going to introduce everybody first, and then we'll move forward with each of these topics. So Aniko, who's my co-chair in SEFI on the SIG, is going to give us her views on the keynotes. Patricia from Tecnológico de Monterrey will talk to us about the taxonomy that was shared. Sonia Gomez from TU Eindhoven will talk about the development of an initial framework to support the development of CEE educators. I do hope Matias is here, but if not, I'll be presenting his bit on a poster he saw on retrieval augmented generation. Darren can't be with us today, but he was so interested to share that he's given me a slide, but I will talk to that. And Heli as well, who facilitated the special interest group workshop at the conference, has shared some ideas, but again, she's busy and has given me her permission, to try and as best as I can do, share what came out of the SEFI workshop. And Heli's based at Lapland University of Applied Sciences in Finland, and Darren is based in Ireland at Engineers Ireland, which is the professional body for engineers within Ireland. So I've said enough. I'm now going to pass over to my wonderful colleagues. And the first one up is Aniko. So over to you, Aniko.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I am Aniko Kalman from Budapest University of Technology and from the University of Nyíregyháza. And thank you for the opportunity that I can give some feedback about the conference. I have one slide and I know that we have very few minutes. So I would like somehow to focus for the keynote speakers, because when we organize a conference, we always try to update that topics which are really currently the most interesting. And I think these three keynote speakers were those who really focus for that topics which I think that very, very important. It can somehow continue for the continuing engineer education, but not directly relevant. But I think, for example, the first one, which is about the ethics, engaging moral imagination in engineering ethics education, is one of the things which we should talk about, because the engineer's role in the future challenges are very important. But how and how can we solve the problem, and how can they be able and empowers engineers to solve this problem? This is very important, and that was a brilliant presentation. You can listen that one. And not to speak about that, when we are talking about artificial intelligence, the ethic is always in front. The second one is about the computing education, cultures of responsibility. I like that presentation because, the using the computer, it was in the 1970s, not so much natural. Nowadays, when we are talking about the 4.0 industrial revolution, this is not a question, that this is a fact that we are living in a digital age. So if we present and if you listen to that presentation, that will show that how the attitude has changed. And the third one, which for me was the most interesting, if I can say, because my background is psychology and education, I like the emotions. When we could speak about the soft skills, in engineer education, because I think everyone knows that the trust, for example, in the economical life is very important. And it can show that not only in the economical life, but in the university, with that very business-oriented situation, there are many problems with the emotions among the students. There were very good and interesting research with very important outcomes. So this is what I would like to suggest you to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniko. Very ably done to summarize 3 amazing keynotes in a very short period of time. So now on to CEE taxonomy, and hopefully Patricia is with us to explain this.
Thank you, Chris. I am Patricia Caratozollo from the Institute for the Future of Education, Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico. And this is a work we were working on the last year. And the important thing is that to create a comprehensive taxonomy for continuing engineering education, we use a mixed method approach, starting with a qualitative analysis of case studies to define key terms and concepts, followed by quantitative review to validate the frequency of these terms in literature. The taxonomy development was based on an inclusive process involving subject matter experts across multiple countries, aiming to map the field of the CEE and create a shared language that can support researchers, practitioners, and educators in aligning with industry trends. And we use an iterative process involved refining and validating the taxonomy by reviewing contemporary literature, integrating synonyms and widely recognized terms, ensuring that the resulting framework is both current and useful for various stakeholders in CEE. And the paper is coming out in Frontiers in Education very soon, these days. And there we will present the version 2.1 of the taxonomy. And the figure you are watching is in the slide illustrate the refining of the CE taxonomy. It maintains the 4 key categories we used last year in the SEFI conference in Dublin. And the categories were drivers and opportunities, organizational arrangement, the types of offerings, and accessibility. And it now reflects the depth and complexity of continuing engineering education programs. The taxonomy also addresses the need for specialized training for educators who teach CE programs, recognizing that teaching professionals may require additional preparation beyond traditional academic roles to effectively deliver education to seasoned professionals. So I think we work very hard in this updated taxonomy. It introduces more granularity in terms of organizational structures with the universities and detailing how CE programs can be centrally managed. And this is what we were working on. Thank you for this space, Chris.
Thank you so much, Patty. And I think one thing to say is that we know that we can, refine the taxonomy further. And obviously one thing we'll continue to do is look to engage with, a wider group of stakeholders. Thank you. Okay, Sonia, hopefully Sonia's with us and can talk to us about the educator framework.
Yes, I'm here, Chris. Thank you very much. Indeed, what we have been working on in the past years is one of the dimensions of continuing engineering education. And what we have now in front of us on the screen is actually responding to one of the core questions we always get from colleagues working in the industry, colleagues working at university level. And this is like, well, if we are now developing the skills of continuing engineering skills of the trainers in the industry, what are actually these skills they need, and is there already a place to find some material, some framework upon which we can start developing further our training programs for educators. And based on this question, we got in our core team, in our SEEK team, we started to look in the literature what is said about how to develop an educator framework and what are the main characteristics. And what we have done, and it has been already presented this year, actually in September in the SEFI conference in Lausanne, was the continuing engineering educator framework. And based on the literature and actually on the work based on ILERIS in 2018, we represented the main characteristics of the framework based on the content, also the incentive, actually what it is for me to learn, and also the interaction on the different elements. And as you can see, indeed, the content is a key element to include always in the training programs, developing these educator skills, depending on specific upon the required context in the industry. But also what is important to take into consideration is the type of practices that it can be included. For example, the workplace and the...
Sonia, you're on mute.
Sonia, you are mute.
I was mentioning indeed the assessment, the work-based and the workplace learning, experiential learning approaches. And another key element is, of course, the learning and teaching approaches that we use, of course, to also in a gradual way to framework and to scaffold the learning. All of these elements are included in what we call now framework, which it has been our first approach to develop these characteristics. Chris, if you please go to the next. Yes, thank you. In this slide, what I would like is just to present our current work, as we have already mentioned that it has been presented in the SEFI conference in EPFL in Lausanne this year, and also the next steps we are now considering. And of course, based also on the feedback we got during the conference and in the SEEK working group discussion, there is a lot of interest towards working on a further development of this framework for a CEE educator. Of course, we can mention that this is great to hear from the participants, and we would like to encourage as well the international perspective to make sure, of course, that this framework is useful for all institutions and all colleagues who are working in this field to develop the educational practitioners and industry coaches skills. And another element is we are thinking of translating this framework in a training material or making more guidelines for approaches and methods for the workplace learning specifically. And of course, we would like to keep working on this area and to present further steps in Finland in the SEFI conference in Tampere next year. Thinking in terms of how to develop maybe a handbook related to the educator skills in continuous engineering education, And we are open, of course, to all your suggestions. And this is what you find in the screen, like number 3, and all kind of suggestions are welcome. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Sonia. Brilliant as always. Appreciate that. So now we move on to the slide that Matias done. Matias, are you with us? Or are you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sure. So I was looking at the poster sessions, and they had quite interesting applications. And this was an application that has been used in Lausanne or developed by EPLF Lausanne. And they are using something that we normally call RAG models, or retrieval augmented generation models. And what they do, I don't know whether you know or not, it's apparently they've been running for a while in different organizations, but they're becoming more used now. So you connect your own information, database information, to a large language model. And what happens is that when you use a query or a prompt for connecting, asking a question, or in this particular case, trying to find a lecture that contains certain information, what the system does is it goes to find information in your own databases, in your own data sources, and takes that information together with your prompt before it asks the large language model. And then the large language model goes through that information, that additional information that it didn't have earlier, and gives you a much more accurate response. So large language models have obviously a lot of weaknesses. They invent things. They are normally trained on old data. But a RAG large language model, on the other hand, is updating the information. It's looking into information that you trust because it comes from your own organization, and still provides a very good answer back. So an answer that is easy to understand. So using this kind of tool, this particular group is able to connect quiz answers to particular lectures. So the student in this case can create this quiz, take a chunk from a quiz question, and then gets to the lecture in the particular course that provides the answer to that question. I found it interesting because normally if you have a professional that wants to study a particular course, a particular content, then you could use a RAG model to give guidance to this professional to find the right content that he or she might be interested in. And they're much cheaper to run compared to a typical old chatbot that you ask maybe a question to a chatbot. These are more cheaper and easier to implement. So I did find it an interesting technology that we could use in different ways related to lifelong learning.
Brilliant, Matias. Nice to see something really different there as well. Thank you. We then move on to TrainEng PDP, and I know that Darren can't present this, so I'm going to present it on his behalf. But TrainEng PDP is a European funded project that has specifically got these 3 objectives about, particularly looking at the development of lifelong competencies is the broader, sense of this. It's a recognition that our young people will have very long careers and therefore will need inherent competencies to be able to navigate their long professional careers. And so this is midway through. I've put some links to the session of which Lynn van der Broek, who's one of the key people involved in this project from KU Leuven, was presenting, and obviously they ran a workshop as well, which is partly what sparked Darren's interest. The final bit of sharing is, again, related to the workshop. So at the SEFI conference, each SIG is allowed to run a workshop. It's usually on the first day. And Heli and colleagues facilitated this workshop this year. There's a lot to come out, and the write-up of this will come out in the proceedings, but some of the future-focused aspects of this that people were grappling with were the 5 points here. How do we determine accurately the needs of learners and the opportunities of sufficient scale to make CEE offerings viable and valuable to learners? There's a great need for greater guidance for universities on how to approach developing CE offerings because it's quite a complex space. As Sonia's touched on already, there's a need to provide educator training to support. We can't assume that we can put an existing member faculty in front of CE educators and they'll do well. There are aspects around AI and other technologies that have an opportunity, and obviously Matias has given us one specific example of that. And how can we use technology to help better align learners' motivations and the CE offerings that we have? And so those were some of the key ideas that came from the SIG workshop, just the top level. So we said at the beginning we're going to share some ideas, and I had some brilliant colleagues from the SEFI CEE that were able to do that. I'm now going to stop sharing and really open this up for discussion. So over to you. I think, Ravi, you have the first hand. Ravi, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Awesome.
Yeah. See, why this continuing engineering education is important is, in US alone, there are 80 million workers who would like to upgrade their qualification for better salaries and to improve their on-the-job performances. So these days, everybody wants to go to a higher level in the workplace. So they want new knowledge which can add to their CV as well as their skills, so that they can do the job better than what they are doing. That is one important point. Second is, there are a lot of developments in technology, especially AI, then IT, then manufacturing. You have additive manufacturing, you have semiconductor manufacturing, you have drones coming, and all these new additions to technology. It demands new latest skills to handle them. So we need continuing engineering education. Along with this, the education part also need to be upgraded, because we have been teaching something which is obsolete or outdated. So we have to update ourselves, and we have better teaching learning methods with technology. So that also, if we add, the entire spectrum of continuing education, engineering education is before us. So in many countries, there are a lot of working professionals who want to upgrade, and it is just like going for a lunch or a dinner. In future, people will go for learning, and you learn for a week and you work for a month. No, that sort of situation we are going to face in near future, because of the changes has become a part of our daily life. So in order to cope with all these emerging ecosystems, I think there should be some structure where we can handle all these learners, jobs, technology, skills required, etc., etc. That is my submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. It's lovely to hear from your perspective. You think there's a need there, that there's obviously technology that that's an important part that resonates with some of what we talked about, and that we need to obviously help the people, the educators, as you say, upskill themselves. I think you raised some interesting parts about structure. One of the things that we are discussing in the SIG is around about business models, and how to think about how we put these together in a dynamic way. And I think you raise a really interesting point, relates back to some of maybe the SEFI workshop around about the skills. This needs to be very much aligned, to what people need, but it needs to be done in a way that is impactful, for the learner, but equally I think that needs to be viable and rewarding for the institutions that are delivering that, whether they be universities or whether they be edtech companies and so forth. So thank you, that's brilliant. Aniko.
I would like to reflect to that one, because you know that when we are focusing for the World Economic Forum report, for example, it says that in the adult education there are great problems, which means that people do not want somehow to continue to learn. So in the adult education they should do something. And in Europe, these figures and these numbers are quite bad, I have to tell you. So I think we should somehow to make something with the adult education, and this is part of the continuing engineering and continuing education part. So, but now, nowadays, this is really a problem.
Yeah, thank you. Does anyone want to come and build on Aniko's point before I let Martin take the floor? Any further points on that?
Yeah, I can link to that.
Wonderful.
To that. My name is Martin Hoberg, and I'm in Swiss representative in Engineers Europe, formerly FEANI. And we are dealing with experiential learning also for our Uring certificate. And the question goes to Mrs. Gomez Puente, perhaps, how to integrate workplace and experiential learning, because from what I gather that this conference took place in Lausanne, it looks more to me like formal education was discussed. And I would particularly like to have more answers on how to integrate experiential learning into that format, or how to make it compatible and comparable.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. What we normally get also from the literature, and what we have received as feedback when we talk about workplace learning, is that experiential learning, in the sense of presenting and reflecting upon what the current activities that the industrial people, the engineers, take place in the workplace, are not really taken into consideration when they are thinking about indeed how to develop these skills. So one of the areas to further investigate indeed is creating the space within the cases being developed to create the training and to think about how the engineers are really working and learning in the industry, is to make sure that the elements on reflection are identified as well and are included as well. And when we talk about also the experiential learning, is just posting them cases, what we call also challenges, upon which they can think in terms of what is I'm doing, how is what I'm doing with other colleagues in a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary learning environment, and actually how to make sure that all of these elements are included when the coaches in the industry, the educators, also in the university, and making sure that are taken into consideration in the training programs.
Thank you, Sonia. Martin?
Yeah, I have an additional question to that, perhaps. You were talking about coaches in industry. We do have that in the dual education, in the apprenticeship, that we have, of course, a scheme of how to qualify coaches. But how to expand that to education or to further learning of adults? Do you envisage a certification scheme of coaches?
A verification scheme?
Yes, a certification scheme, so a qualification scheme. How would they need to qualify to be trustworthy?
Yeah, this is a very good question and very relevant for nowadays, as it will be very interesting and very attractive as well to give the possibility to certify the coaches upon indeed the characteristics and the qualifications they have. Also because we see and we perceive a clear need to have into consideration that engineers, even though they have many years of experience, is also a lifelong learning, a continuing education trajectory, and it will be important indeed to take a look to this question of certifying the coaches in order to be able to keep learning about how people learn and coach people how to learn in the working place.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
Martin, maybe I can ask a kind of question back to you in terms of this being more discursive. You obviously seem to be looking to have it, an integrated approach where you can take formal, informal, and even non-formal learning, in terms of,
That's
people
right.
moving towards professional registration. Do you see that there's an increasing demand for people using the kind of more experiential routes, or do you see that as being increasingly important for ongoing validity of the Urenda qualification?
Yeah, well, with the Urenda 2.0 and the electronic tool for registering, we also introduced a 5-year limitation of validity of the Urenda. And this is in line with the Swiss approach also for the Swiss register. And people after 5 years, they must provide evidence of their learning. And so far we have a mixed approach what to acknowledge, which is also shared with the engineering geologists of Europe. And that may include writing papers, giving conferences, and but also day-to-day work. If you work on interesting projects, if you have internal seminars and consultancies, and if you're a member of a review process, internal reviews of project reviews, peer reviews, or something. So there is a variety of things to be screened for whether they are acceptable or not. And also, what would be the right mix? Of course, writing a book may be good enough for 3 years of CPD, but perhaps it's not really what you're looking for an average engineer in a design engineer in industry. And so this is. We have to tackle this question in 3 years' time. All the people being awarded the Urenda certificate now will need to requalify. Until then, we have to have answers what's to accept and what is not acceptable.
Okay.
And perhaps I have another question to Mrs. Martelliti, who talked about taxonomy. We have at the University of Bern, we followed also seminars on micro-credentials, and micro-credentials are very promising, coming from the Corona times when people were sitting at home and viewing courses in internet. The question is how to make those micro-credentials stakeable, and how to award additional qualifications after micro-credentials, after say 5 or 10 ECTS points. How to convert that into certificate of advanced studies, for example, and whether those courses, micro-credential offerings, need to be accredited, perhaps by program accreditation or institutional accreditation scheme. So there are a lot of questions. Did you, perhaps Ms. Martelliti, did you look into taxonomy also from the viewpoint of stakeability of micro-credentials?
Oh, thank you, Martin, for the question. We are working in the taxonomy, trying to understand the difficulties to have in Europe a common language, but also a common recognition of previous knowledgement, because now each country has their own system to assign the credits or assign the ETS, or to and this avoid the possibility now to have a stackable system. I am talking about Europe because we were working on that framework. But obviously, if we use the information from the United States, from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia. The situation is not easy, and your question is very, very pertinent. Now we have to work in this kind of associations like SEFI to have the opportunity to have a common system to assign the recognition to the previous knowledge. That's correct. We are not able now to do a common system of stackable micro credentials or another methods in continuing engineering education. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. I think, Martin, if I might just use my privilege as host, is just to say that it's an excellent question, and I think it's one that really needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed at a European, pan, national level, in order for something, to be, really workable. We've got technology-based solutions. Other countries are looking, at this idea of stackability, and particularly in terms of digital. Maybe, after this, we can share a previous SEFI at Work session when we were talking about micro-credentials, and we had experts from IACEE and also from within Europe that were talking about this idea of how do we create it, where do we host it, some of the system and structuring of this as well. And I don't know where India is, but they had a piece of legislation called the Academic Bank of Credit, ABC, which was going to be a universal pan-Indian system for everybody having their credits all stacked in one place, and accessible regardless of where which institution they were at. So I think there's some interesting dimensions there that to be explored. But thank you.
Thank you.
Ravi, were you going to respond to this or a new point? Or I saw Matias put his hand up, so I just want to work out whether we want to close this discussion off first before we move on to something else. So Matias, were you coming in to answer something here?
Yes, I think as whether they could be stackable or not depends a bit on how the higher education system works at nationwide, at the particular nation. In Sweden, they are stackable. So if you, for instance, each university course can be translated to one micro-credentials, and a university course would have certain amount of ECTS credits. Now, this has not been introduced, it has not been implemented, but the Association of Swedish Higher Education Institutions have proposed this as a future development, and that would basically mean that each course at bachelor or master level could be packed as a micro-credential. It will probably get a lot of challenges from different parts of Swedish higher education, but the Association of Higher Education had proposed this as a way forward. And in Sweden, the system with stackable credits allows you to, when you have enough credits, you could actually have a degree. The degrees are a bit different here, so you don't have the same structure on degrees that you might have in other places as well.
Perhaps I may assert our Swiss experience. Of course, we have, when we are more advanced in Germany in that respect, we have diplomas what do we call that? DIS and diplomas of certificates of advanced studies. And for example, if you have 4 diplomas, you get a Master of Advanced Studies, so that exists on university level. The challenge is rather how to integrate private courses and private training offerings into such a system.
Yeah, well, what they say here, according to the Association of Higher Education, is that you can't compare one micro-credential with another. You need to look into how this was packed and what is included in a micro-credential. So micro-credential from a vet is not equivalent to a micro-credential from a university. And a micro-credential from a university between one course and another could be very different in terms of volume. So what they basically state is that if you pack a course and it has learning objectives, it has a clear definition, then that would be a micro-credential. So the micro-credential in itself, even though it's stackable, is not counted. It's not that if you have 10 micro-credentials, you will need to see how much is that particular micro-credential worth. And it would be different if it's a vet course or if it's a higher education course. So it won't be that perfect solution where you could stack them from the sense that I have this amount of micro-credentials, and in that case, I achieve this. You would need to look into them.
I'm just conscious we got a couple of hands here. This looks like could be a topic that could go on for a long time. I think it's a brilliant question, Martin. So I've made a note here that we need to come back to this, as an international community. Ravi, you've been very patient, with your hand again. So over to you. What do you want to comment?
You see, the main aim of having a continuing engineering education is not towards a degree, but towards a skill. Many a time I am working in an industry, the technology has advanced, and to handle that, I need special skills, which as on today I may not have. So I go for continuing education. Having a degree or measuring my learning towards a stackable degree, that is not the main aim of continuing engineering education, but how to learn these skills which are of immediate interest for employment. That's what the main focus of continuing engineering education. And the additional advantage is having a stackable degree. That is what I feel. Second thing is, in continuing engineering education, for example, in India, many of the students learn programming by joining a learning platform which offers a lot of problem solving. So the amount of problems you solve which are available on the learning platform will make you get a badge that you are an expert programmer. So that cannot be converted into a traditional degree, but it can be a part of a degree provided other structure of the degree is fixed, and you can substitute this learning in a learning platform through a micro credential. You can substitute some credit, but you can't go towards a full degree. So to have a full degree which is offered by a university, you need to have many other you have to conditions need to be satisfied, and unless those conditions for a regular degree is satisfied, these micro credentials and stacking them cannot result in a traditional degree. That's what I feel.
Thanks, Ravi. I think you raise a really interesting point about what the purpose for continuing engineering education. Is it more bite size? Is it just in time for specific things? Is it about maintaining competencies? Obviously, as Martin might be, referring with the Urenda, standard. But I think we have to accept that it covers both formal, informal, and non-formal learning, and that the mechanisms to glue those together in whatever format is useful actually is a key challenge, and something that we as a community need to get our heads together and really find an effective solution for. So again, I think something for us to continue. I'm just conscious I want to finish on time, and Aniko's been very patient. So maybe I can give the last comment to Aniko before we move into the.
I only would like to add that when we continue, how we would like to make the next step, what will be the next step. We talked about that there are a great change in the classical continuing education institution, mainly after the COVID. There are in the different international higher education, there are new institutions which is somehow linked to the continuing education part, but it has special role. For example, innovation center or a digital center. So that means that this very much distinguished, and we should somehow to make such a research that how it has changed. So that will be the next, or that was some of the suggestion that we should somehow to make that global view, how the classical way of continuing education has changed, and give the responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Aniko. And just before we finish this bit up, I want to acknowledge the comment in the chat from Arden, saying that obviously they've got viewing that CPD or continuing education is about maintaining competence. Yeah, often a view of continuing engineering education is post-bachelor's. So that kind of, I think, ties in with some of the thrust of Martin's questions here as well, and premise, and about expanding knowledge and skills as an individual choice. And I think that's really important. There's an agency aspect there as well. And I think we've touched on the idea a bit of micro-learning through some of those discussions. And Martin, you can have the final rebuttal.
No, I just wanted to add something. It's about upskilling as well, about not just after bachelor, but for people not having a formal education, at least, or at tertiary level, only a technologist education. And because we need more engineers, the question is how to upskill technologists to engineers.
I think I really want to continue that discussion with you, because within the SIG we've had that discussion about where does CEE start. I like you would argue that it's not just for graduate engineers, there are also other routes into engineering, but that's obviously for another day. So I'm going to move to the last bit, and I'm going to share my slides again with you, but perhaps you can let me know that you can see that okay before I start talking to myself and to slides that you can't see. So can I first of all say thank you to obviously my wonderful colleagues in the SEFI SIG that have shared their insights, and also to the brilliant questions that we've had today. It's been really informative to see that some of what we're discussing is important, but also there are other aspects and dimensions. And really, I think what I'd like to emphasize is that we want to keep the discussion going. We don't see this as the end of the conversation, hopefully. So, as a special interest group, we work on annual cycle, and I just wanted to kind of share what our plan is for the coming year. Some of this may come as no surprise to you, in the sense that we're talking about some of those ideas of where we want to continue. But obviously, Patricia's talked about the taxonomy, and so if you're interested and want to talk more, Patricia's email is here. The same on the educator. Obviously, Sonia would be delighted if you wanted to continue those discussions further. We are and want to continue on micro-credentials. We haven't quite worked out what we want to do. We did run a SEFI work session back in June that Aniko co-hosted with our wonderful colleagues at IACEE, where we had Robert Prakash, who's the president of IAC, participating from Stanford. We want to kind of look at enhancing lifelong learning guidance. So Darren, who's also on the SEFI board, wants to look at how that works from an accreditation standpoint. We also want to look at lifelong learning competencies, but I'll say a little bit more about that at the moment. We want to look at CEE models, particularly business models, and obviously there's some early discussions between Chris, and you've met Matias, and our wonderful Costas, from TU Twente, but he's got an excuse not to be here today because he's had some good news recently with his partner having a little one. So he's got an excuse for being on paternity leave for not being with us today. We obviously want to continue to strengthen, build partnerships, and obviously Aniko and I as co-chairs are going to do that. We value hugely our connection with the IACEE, but obviously there are other partners and organizations, in Asia and further afield that we want to look at. We've talked about AI. We haven't specifically put it here. And I think part of the reason is that our colleagues at IACEE, led by Anita, and particularly as the first vice president of IACEE, have been arranging some wonderful webinars round about the use of AI in engineering education, but obviously also within continuing engineering education. And I hope they continue to do that. So rather than duplicate work, let's work out what each other is doing and allow the separate organizations to take that forward. One of the things I was talking about there was lifelong learning competencies, some work from SEFI that crosses across different special interest groups. So this crosses across our special interest group, the one on capacity building and the one on engineering skills, is that there's currently a survey out that's asking for academics, educators, but also practicing engineers to complete a survey round about their views on lifelong learning and their practices. It's available on the SEFI website, but when you get the slides, please do have a link, and we do very much encourage you to complete that and promote that and share that more widely. Now to some future events. With our wonderful colleagues at IACE, they have an upcoming symposium on the 3rd to 4th of April. I love that picture, that Sonia and Anita have shared with us. That looks like an amazing campus. It's going to be there at Purdue University in West Lafayette on the 3rd to 4th of April. So please, at this stage, hold the date. I know that colleagues at IACE are busy working on the details and the calls, so as soon as that becomes available, we, along with AICE, will be promoting that. We've already heard from Sonia about next year's conference. It will be in Tampere in Finland from the 15th to the 18th of September. We're very much hoping that there will be a focused afternoon or around continuing engineering education. Why are we doing that? Well, the Special Interest Group on Continuing Engineering Education and Lifelong Learning is one of the oldest SIGs within SEFI, and it will be 45 years old at the conference in 2025. So I think there's an opportunity for us to recognise that continuing engineering education has a long history, but also has a very bright future as well. Final thing is that this has been a SEFI at Work session, which brings people together. I just wanted to highlight, because you might have broader interest, that there are further SEFI at Work sessions coming up, which are available here on events. One of the things to watch out over the coming 24-25 period is that the International Handbook of Engineering Education was researched and launched at the Dublin conference last year, and the SIGs will be facilitating looking at specific chapters of those over the coming year. So the handbook is open access, so you don't have to pay for it. So please, do have a look at it. It's a hugely valuable resource. But equally, through this coming year, there'll be events where the authors of those chapters will be getting and summarising and giving you an opportunity to interact and engage with them. So, as I send this out, obviously you can please contact and connect to the relevant organisation. We hope we've inspired you that continuing engineering education is a very exciting field and there's a lot to discuss. But I think importantly, what I hope you take away from this is that there's a lot of really great people that are working in this area, that are working in the SIGs, that are working in IACE. So please come and join the conversation and work with us. And my final thing is just to say thank you to our colleagues at SEFI headquarters that have arranged all of this and made this possible. We've arranged it through SEFI because one organisation has to do it. So I'm grateful to them. But I really want to say thank you to IACE for promoting this. It is so wonderful to have that connection and that global partner and people being interested in the problems and opportunities and the exciting future that we have. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a blessed evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you hopefully again at meetings and to continue this discussion. Thank you so much.